This video, I'm going to show how we can connect FactoryTalk Optix to a Micro800 PLC, such as the Micro820, using the Modbus TCP driver. At the time of this video being recorded, the latest version of Optix is what's shown here on the screen, 1.2.0.272. And in this current release, the only way that we can connect to a Micro800 PLC, one that supports Ethernet, is using the Modbus TCP driver. For our Logix controllers, such as the control Logix and compact Logix, we can use the native Ethernet IP driver and connect to the Ethernet port that way. But in the Micro800, or if we're going to use a Micrologix 1400, Modbus TCP is our current method of doing it. In a future release of FactoryTalk Optix, Rockwell will plan to have a more native communication directly to the Micro800 PLCs. But again, in our current release, it is only going to be Modbus TCP available to us. So with that said, let's kind of show how we would do this. So first I want to go to my Micro820 CCW software. So I actually have a real Micro820 PLC sitting here on a desk. I've shown like the Logix Echo emulator in some other videos. It should be noted that the Micro800 simulator, which is the Micro820 SIM, does not support Modbus communications to the simulator. So I have a real Micro820 PLC that I'll be connecting to and running this logic in and treating it as a Modbus TCP server. So if you're not familiar with the CCW software and for the Micro820 PLC, the main thing we have to configure is we have to tell it. So under the Ethernet settings here, I need to check the Modbus TCP server state as enabled. So that'll enable the Modbus TCP server. I do give it an IP address, the same IP address that I'm using to connect to the controller. And then the other thing I need to do is I need to map my Modbus addresses. So there's another setting, another tab here called Modbus mapping. And I just basically will choose add. And then I can pick the tag out of the list, out of all the tags available. I can pick the tag and add it to the Modbus mapping table. So I already kind of pre-built it. So I have several different types of tags here. I've got a couple of Boolean tags that are using the 0 function code. I got basically I'm going to be able to write. These are coils, so I'm going to be able to write to these and turn on and turn off this pump remotely using Optix. I have a discrete input coil register, I should say. That's pump motor. That's my 10001. And then I have a couple of holding registers here with integer values. I'm just going to kind of generate some random flow data and temperature data, just kind of create some numbers randomly and let them be read by Optix. So I've got some basic logic here, real simple latch circuit that just has the remote start and the remote stop. So my Optix application will control this start and this stop bits, and then we'll be able to monitor the status of the pump running coil here. And then I have my test flow rate, my test temperature. I'll be reading these back in Optix through those holding registers. So I'm going to go ahead and get connected to my controller and have that way I can kind of watch this logic here in a little bit. So while that gets connected, we'll come back here to Optix. So I've gone ahead and created some of the structure required to save a few minutes. And mainly in the UI or user interface, I've kind of created the main window. And I've created a couple of pages, one called Pump 1 and one called Micro820. So under my pages, I have Micro820. I've pre-built this one just to kind of be a little bit of a reference sheet for us that we can pull up in the project. Again, I'm looking at what registers, Modbus registers are available to me. 0 for coils, 1 for discrete inputs, 3 for input registers, and 4 for holding registers. I've got the IP address of my Micro820 PLC as a reference here, 10.10.1.11, and we will need to tell it what port, which is 502, which is the port for Modbus TCP. And then here are those tags that I've mapped. I just kind of took a little snippet of what I had there in CCW and just put it here as a reference. So this is nice because it gives us our addresses for each of these variable names. All right, page, and then the other page we have here is called Pump 1. Pump 1 will be where we'll kind of add some objects to interface with our Micro820. So what we need to do, of course, is we need to configure the communications driver. We haven't done that yet. So again, there's two ways to do that. I can right-click on COM drivers and say New, and then add a Modbus driver. Or I could go back to my dashboard and use the wizard. But I haven't shown this method, so let me go ahead and right-click. I'm going to say New Modbus driver. Now, nothing happens here in this dashboard area, but underneath the COM driver, I have the Modbus driver 1 was added. So now I need to right-click on this, say New. I'm going to say Add a new Modbus station. So Modbus station 1. So over here in the properties for Modbus station 1, I have the name, which I can change. I could call it Micro820 to make it a little bit easier to keep track of, and I think I'll go ahead and do that. I'll just put TCP behind it. We have a couple of options here for things like tag optimization, swap bytes, swap words, swap double words, and each one of these gives you a little bit of a help, explodes out. According to Rockwell's knowledge base, they do suggest that you change the swap words to false, so I'm going to go ahead and do that based on their advice. And the only other thing I need to do here is I need to make sure that I give the IP address for the Micro820. So I'm going to type in that 10.10.1.11. And the port was defaulted to 502, and that is good. We don't need to change that. So I've just set up my my Modbus station. Next step is we need to add the tags. So if I were to expand this, we'll see there's a tags folder, types folder. There are no tags. Now, when we're doing the Logix driver and some other videos, when we were able to create an Ethernet IP driver, we were able to automatically import tags from the controller. In this case, being it's Modbus, there is no import of tags, either offline or online. So we'll have to create each tag individually. So we'll right-click on tags, we'll say New and Modbus tag. Now, we can change our names up here. So the name of the tag by default was Modbus tag 1. If you recall, if I come back to my CCW project, we had 5 tags or so here. We had a remote start, remote stop, pump motor, basically the motor's running, the pump's running. We had a flow rate and a temperature. So let's go ahead and create the start tag. So I'm going to say start. And we need to tell it, what is its data type? So in this case, start is a bit, so it's a Boolean. So we're gonna select Boolean and hit enter there. The other thing we need to do is we're going to tell it what's the memory area. So these are our options. Again, holding register, coil, input register, or discrete input. In this case, I'm going to send a write command to the start bit in the controller. So I'm going to choose coil. The only other thing I need to do at this point is give it the coil number. Now, this is where it gets just slightly tricky. Here in the Micro820, I have my start at 0. 0001. Now, Micro820, one is the starting point. There is no 0. But in Optix, it's 0. So we're going to be kind of offset by 1, basically. So we're going to leave this set to 0 in order to read that 0001 register. The only other option here is element, or the array. So if it's an element or if it's an array. This is not an array, so we're going to leave it at element. So start is created. I'm going to right click, say new tag. This time we're going to call this one stop. Once again, I need to make sure that this is a Boolean. I need to change this to coil. And this time I'm going to make this a 1. Because once again, I'm going to be reading 0002. Our next one is pump motor, or pump running, basically. And this time we're going to be reading a discrete input, which is the register 1 here. So we'll come back to Optix. We'll create another tag. Whoops. Pump running. And one more time, this needs to be a Boolean. We hit select. And this time we're going to choose a discrete input. So discrete input, that's going to be our function code 1. We can leave our discrete input register at 0 because again we're starting at 10001. So we can leave this as 0 and we can leave element the way it is. That leaves two more tags to create: flow rate and temperature. Both of these are integers, and both of these are tied to our holding registers for 0001, for 0002. So we'll right click on tags. We'll say new Modbus tag. This time we'll call this one flow rate. I need to change this from an integer 32 to an integer 16. So integer 16 is basically an integer, whereas integer 32 would be a double int or double integer. So I want to make sure we pick integer because back here in our Micro820, it is an integer and not a dint, not a dint. It is an integer. So integer 16, holding register is the right selection here. And now our register number, same thing with the offset. So we're going to stay with 0. Now that we're a holding register, we also have a bit offset. We don't need to worry about that. And then we're going to leave this as element. And one more to create, and that is new Modbus tag. This time we'll call it temperature. Make sure we make this an integer 16. Keep it holding register, and this time we will be offset by 1. Because again, our temperature is 4002. Alright, so that's all we need to do to set up the Modbus driver and the tags. So now we can come back to our pump 1 display, and we'll start to put some objects on here to interface with our controller. We're going to right click on that pump 1. We'll say new base controls, and we're going to add, first thing we'll do is we'll add a switch. We'll use a switch for this. All right, so this will be our start. So let me go ahead and add a label just so we can keep track of this. So this will be our pump start. And then I'll go ahead and copy this, paste it, and we'll have our, we'll call this one pump stop. Now, most likely you wouldn't use a slider for your start and stop, but it'll serve its purpose for demonstrating. One other thing we'll do is we'll go ahead and add an LED display. That way we'll just get a visual indication that our pump is running. I'll copy this label, paste it, and we'll just call this pump running. All right, so all we're going to do now is we need to tie these elements to their various tags. So we'll start with the LED first, since that one's fairly easy to do. And what we need to do is we just basically need to tie it to, we're going to tie it to the element active here. You can see we have lots of options, when we come to properties, such as changing the color and the size and the appearance. We can go from circular, or we can make it rectangular as well if we want. But active basically means that when it's on or off. So we're going to tie this to the dynamic link. We're going to scroll down. We're going to find our COM drivers, our Modbus driver 1, our tags, and pump running. All right. So then we'll come to our first slider. This will be our start slider, the one that will turn on the start. What we're going to do is we need to add an event, since it's it's an actionable device, just like a push button. We're going to hit the plus symbol there. We're going to say commands, variable commands. We're going to do a toggle. And then the variable to modify, we'll hit dynamic link. We'll scroll down. We'll find COM drivers, Modbus TCP, tags, start. And then the stop, we'll do the same thing. Commands, variable, toggle. The variables to modify. Scroll down, COM drivers, Modbus, tags, stop. And then if we want to just display the values of our flow and our temperature, we can do that by right-clicking, saying New, Base Controls Label. And we can tie our label. We get the text of the label, we can tie it to the dynamic link. And the dynamic link can be, once again, under our COM drivers, tags. This time we'll do flow rate. And then I'll copy this and paste it. And this time I'll just update the dynamic link to be temperature. All right, so we have our base, kind of our base elements here, our driver set. So we're ready to test this out now. So I'll save my project, and we're going to use the emulator once again here. So I'm going to start my emulator. So there's my emulator running. I have my two screens here. So the Micro820 screen is all the details of the project. The Pump 1 screen is the things I just created. I'm going to go ahead and bring my project, CCW project, back up. I'll come here to the live logic. So as you can see already that I'm getting numbers updating for my flow rate and my temperature. I didn't label these, but we see 97, 98, 784, 792. So these are updating properly. So if I were to now toggle my pump start bit, and there it actually started. So this is a maintain slider, so I'll need to kind of turn it back off, and that it just dropped out. My pump is running because I haven't latched in. And now if I were to slide my pump stop, and that now toggled, and I need to go ahead and toggle it back off in order to bring it back to the initial state. So that's it. Modbus, fairly straightforward and simple to set up and use with the Micro820 PLC.